All right. Welcome everyone to the Stratum Insight webinar today. My name's Adam Kurtz, and I will be stepping you through today's topic. And today's topic is, as you can see, Intro to Stratum Calculations. So we'll be going through a review of how to do some calculations within the viewer interface. We'll step into some common business calculations, pretty simple ones. We'll get a little more complicated and look at how you could use your attribute fields and your time dimensions in calculations. And then just in case you get any trouble, you can actually cancel any runaway view that might occur. So we've got some tips here on how to manage those. And then we'll step into a demo and take any questions. So that's our plan for today. Just kind of going through a review of the calculation expression window. If you ever add a calculated column to your viewer, your Stratum view, you'll get presented with this menu in which you'll need to add in your calculation expression. So some key areas here in the calculation expression window obviously is the expression itself. So we can see that there is some syntax there involved in order to calculate, whatever it is you want to calculate. So that's where that's written. To the left over here, you've got the different things that are available within your view as part of your selection list. So typically you'd have like measure data, your measure items would be expanded here so that you could select, whatever measures you'd want to use here for the expression. Other things are available here. Basically anything within the view, any hierarchies, any measure items would be available to use within your calculation. You can also get more sophisticated with some MDX functions. We're not going to go there today, but you can use some other functions that we provided for you that are easy to use, actually, called Stratum viewer functions. So as a matter of fact, this is one of them, percent of change. So if you ever want to use basically a percent of change, which is essentially just dividing one measure over the other. So we can see that our July or our measure for this year over last year's the same measure would give us a percent of change for sales. Up here, the caption expression area is where you'll fill in basically the title of the measure. So as you can see, it's called sales percent change. And that's a free form area. You can place your cursor up there and type in whatever you want to name the measure. To the upper right hand corner is the actual format that you want to display the numbers in. So typically if it's a percentage, obviously you'd want to use a display format for a percent sign. Certainly there's dollars available or just straight units. So that's just a pull down menu. It's pretty easy to manipulate there. And that's kind of new. That wasn't there in some prior versions. So if you don't see that available, that's typically because you're on an older version. So definitely contact us if you don't see those available, and we'll look into see if we can get you upgraded. So that's the expression window. So you'll have that obviously whenever you build a calculation, you'll have that area to work with. Here we've got some quick little snippets of some common calculations, like just a simple variance. We could see here that within our view, if we were to add in a variance, it's pretty simple to do. Obviously, we're just taking one measure and subtracting it from the other. We can see here that the syntax is pretty simple. We've selected this year's measure for sales minus last year's measure for the same time period. The format, as we can see, is the $ format. And we can see that the caption expression or the title of the measure is going to be variance. So once I click OK to that, and that becomes available within the view, then I can actually use that within another calculation if I wanted to. So you do have that concept where you can use calculations, of course, within other calculations. So here's that percentage change. That's where we grabbed it from. And again, the same concept here is that, an easy way of doing a percentage change calculation here is to supply it with the numerator and the denominator, which is essentially what we've done here. And that's it. What's cool about this is that these formats, these functions that we provide, not only are they quick and easy to define, but they prevent divide by zero errors. Because whenever you're doing division, you always have that possibility or that chance that your divisor is going to be a zero, which is an undefined value, and that typically will get displayed within Stratum as a kind of a funky looking character, and it could wreak havoc on performance as well. So this is a great way, if you use the Stratum viewer functions, it's a great way to avoid these divide by zero issues. So definitely use those as needed, especially if you're doing any type of division. If you want to take something over and divide it over the other, this percentage change is your guy, and you want to use it. So that's a little snippet on the functions that you could use within the calculations. Furthermore, you can also use your attributes within the calculation as well. So for instance, a classic example here is using list price, maybe to extend out what your list price would be versus what your actual price is, and then calculating a discount off of that would be one example. Here we can see that we've got the syntax for turning an attribute into basically just a column of list prices. And so be careful here, because this particular expression here may return a lot of empty rows here. We can see that, if I were to do this this way, it would run the view, and I could see a lot of empty rows. Why is that? Well, the expression itself is actually returning the list price for all the items. And so, you're gonna run into a scenario there where, and here's the list price extended, even though those items don't have prices in them, they do have an attribute field, and the attribute field has a 0 in it. So as we can see, we're bringing in just stuff we don't care about here within the view. Our row count is higher than it needs to be. So how do we clean that up, right? So is there a way that we can clean that up, make it so that it doesn't return all those rows? What would we do to do that? So that would be a best practice. Well, one thing would be to use an if statement. You could certainly do an if statement here, where you could say, well, if I were to do this, I would say, my primary measure within the view, if that is indeed 0, then make the value of this measure a null, so it doesn't return a 0. So if my measure data is 0, return a null. Otherwise, go ahead and return that list price field. And down below, if you notice that the default syntax of that if statement can be made available down below, and that's what it looks like. So this is your classic Boolean logic, where you're checking something, and if it's true, then do this, otherwise do that. And that's essentially what we're doing up top here. So if my sales units are empty, don't show any records, is basically what I'm saying here. And then just make this field null, which will then clean that up. So if we were to implement this instead of the other one, what would this look like? Much cleaner. Instead of 160 rows of data, which many were empty, now we're just dealing with 102 rows of data, and the data looks much better. It's much cleaner. We can see actual prices here. And basically we're just showing products that are being transacted upon, is essentially what we're accomplishing here. And that's how you would do that. You would use that expression basically to quantify something before you show everything. Kind of the same topic, but using a dimension instead of an attribute. We know that an attribute is tied to a dimension, but now we have this concept of using the actual dimension. And you can use time, or you can use any other dimension for that matter. In this example, we're using time to create a year-to-date sales calculation. And so in this case, then if I merge together my time dimension for current year and along with my measure for sales amount, that's exactly what we're doing here. And that creates basically an intersection of the database where it will just show current year sales. And so when you calculate this, you can summarize this measure against any of the other levels that you might have: company, customer, product, and it will always show year-to-date sales. So that's kind of nifty. And you can do the same thing with month-to-date. You can do the same thing with, of course, last year, year-to-date, and so on and so forth. So these calculations, once you create them, they become something with and notice the static caption expression up here. So if you're using, for instance, if you're using any of our connectors, like our Power BI connector, or maybe you're using the Excel connector, you might want to build a view that does something like this so that you can create static expressions. You can create quick year-to-date calculations so that it might be easier for users to use in their connectors. And then finally, here is well, not finally, but conditional formatting to kind of spice up the calculation itself. So in this example, we can see in our view that we've got a conditional format here. Well, we've got a couple of them here, don't we? But the month-to-date sales percent of change is the one that I did our properties on. So if I were to right-click that measure in my View Explorer, which is essentially what we're looking at here, the View Explorer is a wonderful tool that within your view that you can open and manage your view with. Here down in the measure items area of the View Explorer, I can see all my measures. And within that, I can right click any one of my measures and check properties on those measures. So for instance, here, I've got month-to-date sales percent of change in which I've right clicked and checked properties on. And down below are my properties fields, and one of those is conditional format. And as we can see, it's been turned on, and notice that a conditional format has been selected here. And so, by doing so, I can either select a global conditional format or I can create one of my own. And so that's what has been done here to basically show negative numbers in more of a bold font. Notice also the red background and the red status indicator saying that this is screaming at me basically that this is not good. There's a cautionary area, and I'm not really seeing any green, so we'll have to take a look at the thresholds of that. We can take a look at that in the demo, and perhaps we can change that to suit our liking. But don't forget that's available. Conditional formatting, of course. You can also do some pop-up expressions on that so that the users know what some of those thresholds are. Pretty nifty stuff. Here, if we get into the traffic light itself, we can see that the initial definition is indeed anything greater than 20% or a 0.2 is how we would define that. And then anything above 0 but between a 0.2 and a 0 would be a yellow. And then anything negative, of course, we saw plenty of negative numbers in there, would be represented as red. So if you ever get into a situation where you're defining these calculations and you see this wonderful circle of death just keep spinning and spinning, no, don't fear. You can certainly just click on that cancel button, and it will terminate the long-running view. It will terminate the process on the server, and there's nothing to worry about. So definitely, if you're not up to 7.1 of Stratum Viewer, you'll definitely want to upgrade so that you'll benefit not only with some of these wonderful enhancements that we've done with the later versions, but certainly this cancel button will provide your users a wonderful way to get out of a longer running view that doesn't need to be running very long. So a great way to get out of that, and an easy way to do that. for you administrators out there, you can actually go into the viewed monitor in your administration managed things area and or your admin tools, depending on what version you're running. And again, this is only available for version 7.1 or greater, where you can actually go into a menu and see into your view monitor and see what views are actually running. And this will show you the view, how long it's been running, and yes, you can terminate the view here as well. So it's a great tool to monitor your viewer application to see if there's any longer unnecessarily running views. And that's your view monitor. Again, my name is Adam Kurtz. That's my email. That's my phone number. You know how to reach me if you have any questions, concerns, comments. If you would like to see a demo of some of this stuff, I would love to spend some time with you. So check out our website, check out our CustomerNet site. That's where you'll download your upgrades. You'll also be able to get to our forum and start communicating with other users. We have a YouTube channel, so make sure you look for us there as well. All right, with that being said, let's take a look at this stuff. If we were to go into our comparative sales view, and we can see that indeed we've got some calculations going on here with some traffic lighting. So, you know, how does this calculation work? If I were to double click on that calculation, we can see that this particular calculation is basically one of the calculations we were looking at within the presentation. So here we can see that we've indeed we've used this stratum viewer function. So if we were to expand that out, we can see that percentage change was used here. I'm going to place my cursor down here below and just click on percentage change so you can see the simplicity of how this would be calculated or defined, right? It's really just saying pick your numerator, pick your denominator. So if we were to highlight this whole thing, I could just do a Control A on everything here and get rid of it. I can rewrite the expression pretty simple, right? If I were to just say percentage change and then open up my measures area, it was basically just saying, well, this year versus last year, wasn't it? So if I were to validate that, it will go ahead and say, okay, yeah, that looks good, expression is valid. And then I'll click OK. Now, nothing's going to change your, well, I did, I shouldn't say that because it did change. So that's interesting. It did change. So nevertheless, we've got a percent of change here on our, oh, I see what I did here. That's for month to date. Duh. So I basically redid the one for this one here. So that's why the numbers are matching. Well, let's fix that. Pretty easy to fix, isn't it? So if we were to highlight that, let's go ahead and rewrite that. And then in this case, we were using the month to date one. So that would be this guy and that guy. And then we'll see our red come back. Indeed, there it is. So pretty simple, right? Going in, clicking in and adding a calculation or changing an existing one. We can see up here that we can write our expression to say basically whatever we want. Of course, we wouldn't want to do that. So as you can see, it's a free form area here to put in my caption expression. And that was an enhancement where you can just quickly type something in and get something in there very, very quick and easily. Over here to the right, we can see that, well, a couple of things. New version brought in a fill color too. So if I want to fill in that, I don't because I'm using conditional formatting. But nevertheless, I could fill in, if I weren't using conditional formatting, I could fill in a background color for that column. Here we can see also the format for that particular expression would be returned in a percent sign, a percentage format with 1 decimal. Okay, let's click OK again. Once again, there's the same numbers, and the reason being is that again we changed it and then we fixed it, didn't we? All right, so that's kind of that. I can drag and drop that wherever I want. If I want that to become before those two measures or after it, it really doesn't matter. As you can see, you can drag and drop that stuff around. The conditional format, how would we go in and change the conditional format? Well, again, I could do a couple of things. I could right click here and go to properties and it will present itself over here to the right. The properties menu will then give me access to the conditional format area. We can see one already selected. If I come here to the right and click this little button here, it will then send me into the selection and it will show me that indeed this was a global format that was already defined. Now, maybe I want to change this. We don't have anything green going on, and so if I were to go into custom, it would then start me out with what was already defined here. So we can see that anything greater than 20% would be should be green, and so maybe this threshold's a little unattainable. So if we were to come in here and maybe do 15%, and in this case, since it's custom, we'll give it a different name. Something like that. So now I can go ahead and click OK, and we should see some green pop up if anything has been greater than 15%. Well, maybe we should go back in and change that again. So I'm going to go back in, and it looks like we'll need to maybe make that 10%. Let's try that. There we go. So now we're getting some green pop up. That might be more reasonable traffic light here. Anything greater than 15% or 10% shows up as green. So how does that look? Once that's done, we can come in and click on that. We can see that our first rule is to say, well, if it's greater than 10%, make it green. Our second rule here is if it's greater or equal to a 0. And it's inherent that since this rule is already applied here for the green level, that we've got a range here of 0 to 10%, right? Don't we? That'll be yellow. And then anything else is red. And that kind of leaves us with negative numbers at that point. And that's how you would write something like this, right? The actual formatting, how do I get the green to show up the yellow and the red? Well, that's all in your format button. You'll choose the color and the font, the style, the effect of what you want to do there under the format buttons. If we see here we can see a bolded number, and indeed that was selected here. The icons are done in the icon area, so we can see that that was selected for my green area. The yellow button was selected for the cautionary area, and then for the red, we can see that the downward arrow. You have many more if you wanted to use something else like flags or symbols. Maybe a red X might look better. You can apply those immediately and then see how the red X would look as opposed to the downward looking arrow. It's up to you, but you can get really kind of fancy or change things around if you want. I don't know about fancy, but here down also is the pop-up expression. So if I wanted to tell the user what they were looking at, they might question, well, what is this threshold? I don't, what's green? The green the pop-up would basically say, it would give them the conditional format rule. So anything greater than a 0.1, or if it's a percent, if they have any business acumen, they would know that that would be 10%. So they could quickly see the thresholds. That's for anything. For all other values, not so apparent. Probably I might want to write that differently. The cautionary area is going to give them anything that's greater than or equal to 0 there. So it gives them somewhat of an idea of what the thresholds are and how they come together. And it gives them the ability to get more information about what this traffic lighting is doing. So so those are kind of the different things that you can do with the traffic lighting. Obviously you can add in, we kind of went in and messed around with some of those stratum viewer functions with the percent of change. Another thing we can do, and by the way, this is the new version 7.3. So if you don't have that available, I strongly urge you to upgrade because it's fantastic. Here we can see that my favorites area is now part of this tabular left frame menu. So that's available. Let's take a look at a couple more here. We can come in and we can see how we would use the ranking, or not the ranking, but the keeping things fairly simple here. the discount analysis. So here we're using the pickup field current list price to create our extended list price calculation. So here's a classic example of using an attribute field for product into a calculation. How did we do this? Well, first of all, we're at the product level and we have brought in the product attribute for list price. So that has to be available so that we can calculate upon it. Here's our calculation. We can see the extended list price for these items. How did we calculate this? Well, we can come in, double click that, right? And we can see that this was calculated using our val function against that attribute field. The val function turns it into a numeric field because the attribute field is typically, well, it is always a string value. So here we're saying, we'll make that a number by including the val function and then multiply that against my sales units to give us that extended list price. And that's our format is $1, our title is extended list, and that's essentially what we have here, is all of our products extended out, list price extended out, and we can see that indeed, we see that we have a question. We will get to you for sure. And by calculating that against our sales amount, we can get, actually, that's a variance, but it's also a discount amount, isn't it? So that presents our discount. So good stuff. It sounds like we have some questions.
Hi, this is Anne.
I believe so. Let's and feel free to chime in if you want to.
Can you hear me?
Let's see what the calculation. Let's see if that does apply. What does it give us? Yeah, so we can present something there if that's what you're asking. If you can do that on or this right here on the actual measure, I see. Looks like yes, you can do that here as well. So whatever you would want to do there to do it on a regular measure item, looks like you can do that. Yes.